Hi everyone. So we are continuing with our Isabella series, and what we are going to be doing next is the earring. And this is a very fun project. And so what we're going to do is we are going to bezel our 12mm Rivoli. Then we are going to do a stitch in a ditch, and then we'll finish off with the embellishment and then adding on our ear wire. Okay, so let's go ahead, let's gather up our supplies that we need, and let's go ahead and get started. So we are going to bezel our 12mm Rivoli. So once your nail polish has dried on the back, we can go ahead and get started. Again, you don't have to do that, but it does help out to protect the foil in the back. And what we're going to start off with is a standard peyote stitch. And for 12mm, I typically use 30 Delicas. Now that can vary, Miyuki Delicas, that can vary. It can vary based on the batch because sizes can vary in between. Just to give you an example, I had removed one of the beads because it was a lot smaller than the other. So things can happen that can affect the size. So I'm just going to bring in this a little closer so you can see. But if you look at this, you can see the one at the very end, this one here by itself, is a lot smaller than the other two. And keep in mind, these beads are fairly tiny, so when they're being machined and cut, you know, thousandths of a millimeter can make a huge difference. If you're using Toho Aikos, they tend to be a little bit more, you tend to have less problems, and they'll be a little bit bigger, so that can also vary here. So there's a few things that can have an impact on that. But again, I typically use 30. So we'll start off with that. So I'm using 30 Delicas. And what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to do a simple circle. And I'm going to go through the very first two Delicas. There we go. So I went through the very first two Delicas. Now I'm just going to slide this down, let it rest on my stop bead. And by the way, you'll need about I put on a wingspan with about 6 to 8 inches for tail. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is for the peyote stitch, we're just going to do the peyote stitch, is every other Delica I'm going to go through. So I'm going to pick up one and go through, I'll skip a bead and go through the other. So the bead that I skip, the new Delica will go ahead and sit on top. And that will give me a total of 15 because 2 divided by 30 is 15. So I'll have 15 for the next row. So let's just take a little closer look. So I'm coming out of here, skipping this bead, picking up a bead, and going through there. Skipping this one and going through that one. And then I'm just going to try my best to hold things into place as I'm adding the new bead. Things oftentimes will need to be readjusted, especially when I'm first starting out. There we go. Ta-da! And then we'll go ahead and do the same thing. So I'm skipping this one right here, and then I'll go through this one. So I'll pick up my bead, skip one, go through the other, do my best to hold things into place as I'm adding the new bead. And then I'll do that all the way around. So meet me back here when you get close to the end, and we'll do the very end one together and step up, okay? So I just have one more Delica to add on for this round before I step up. So I'm coming out of, whoops. So I'm coming out of here. I'm going to be adding a bead on top of here and skipping it, going through here, and then going into this bead for the step up. So I picked up my bead, going through here. I skipped one. Let that bead sit on top. The bead I skipped. Then I'm just going to go through here for the step up. Now the next round will be our 15-0s, but before we do that, let's go, if your Pewter stitch is flat like this, go ahead, put it on something round and shape it. There we go. And this works out really, really nice. You just put it on here, make sure it's in a round format. Whoops. Let me make sure. You know what? I should be backed up here. So I just put it on a peyote stitch, and then what I did is I took this Sharpie, and I'm just using this to kind of shape it to make sure it's in a round format. Okay? And now I can go ahead and do my step up. I mean my next row. Alright, so for the next step, we're just going to pick up 15-0s. And the nice thing about the peyote stitch is it creates a little notch for you, so you know exactly which bead to skip. So our thread is coming out of here. I'm just going to pick up a bead and go through the next bead that's sticking out, and my bead will sit in the part that it is kind of like a little notch. Whoops, I went through 2 beads, so I'm just going to back up here. There we go, and then I'll just tug a little bit, and what that will do is as that will create a smaller and smaller circumference as we go around. So go ahead and do that, and then meet me back here. We'll step up for the next one. Pretty simple. Alright, now we're ready for our step up. So I'm going to put on the last bead for this row. Go through, whoops, let me just go back and make sure I'm in camera here. So I apologize. And so I'm coming out of here, and I'm going to go through here. Then I'm going to go through that 15-0 that the first one that I put on after that, and that will be my step up. And if you guys want a more in-depth review of how to do a peyote stitch on a 12mm Rivoli, I do have one on my page, so you can go ahead and go back and look at that. I'm just doing it a little quicker here because I do already have that there. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead, put this on, and then go through that first 15-0, and that's my step up. So what I'll be doing is I'm going to go ahead and pick up another, I'm going to put on one more row, 15-0s, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to go all the way around, and when you do that, make sure you just tug a little bit so you can close up that circumference, okay? So go ahead, pick up your beads, and just go through the bead that's sticking out. And in this case, it will be the 15-0s we just put on. There we go. And tug a little bit so that bead sits properly in the center. And then go all the way around. You don't have to do this, but go up like you would a step up, and then meet me back here and we'll do the back side of this, okay? If you want to do a third row, go ahead and do that before meeting me us back here. Otherwise, just meet us back here. We'll do the 2 rows in the front and the 2 rows in the back, okay? All right, take care. All right, so I'm about to start the back side. So I took my needle off my thread and put it on my tail. You don't have to do that. If you want, you can just add a new needle. It's whatever you prefer. But I just thought I'd point this out. And I think this is one of the reasons why I love bezeling, is I love this, just looking at this, it reminds me of an eye. You know, I think that's also why I like to do it in 2 different colors. I don't know. I'm weird. All right, so I'm about to start my back of my bezeling. And so what I like to do is I like to go ahead and pop in my Rivoli, let it sit in there. And I just take that, hold that in. Ta-da. And then I just go ahead and start, same as we did on the front, we're going to do on the back. So let me just get in a little closer. I'll try to do a better job in staying in frame. Not yell at me. Anyway, so I'm coming out of here, skipping this one that's the little notch. So skip the notch and then going through the part that's the tab that's sticking out. And so I'm going to pick up my first 15-0. I'm going through that. And I'm going to just do that all the way around, just like we did on the back side. And the step up is just simply when you go through that first seed bead that you put on for this row. So the step up is when you go through this the second time and you just go through the 15-0, because then you're ready to do the step up from there. So go ahead, do 2 rows. If you want, go ahead and do 3. I will be doing 2. That's typically what I do. It just depends on the project and the width of it, but I'm using a Swarovski's Rivoli, and it seems like 2 is just enough. So go ahead and meet me back here after you've done your full 2 rows, and if you're doing the 3rd, go ahead and do that and then meet me back here, and then we'll do our stitch in the ditch and get moving on further to making our little project, okay? All right, so meet me back here. And again, if you need more in depth and want to go a little slower with this, I do, and I'll provide a link to this, I do have a video out just bezeling 12mm Rivoli, okay? All right. Okay, welcome back. All right, so first and foremost, I apologize. I lied, not intentionally. But we're going to do our reinforcement before we do our stitches in the ditches. So what we're going to do is, so there's 2 thoughts that I kind of have when I approach this. Is a lot of times I like to do equal amounts, like equal amounts on the front, equal amounts in the back, and then there's always the question is this the most efficient? And then you got the other spectrum of quality. So I think a lot of things interplay in when you're doing your reinforcement of your bezel on your peyote stitch. That makes a difference is the quality of your tension. And I've gotten a little bit better with my tension. In the past, and I probably still am a little bit, but I've gotten much better, whereas my tension was a little too tight. So for me, I used to go back and forth, and also the center. So I a lot of times would start with the center. When I first started doing this, I started in the center, then I would do the front, then the back. Now that my tension's getting better, I haven't needed to do that because I keep things fairly even now. So feel yourself out of what's best for you, okay? And there is no wrong. I am definitely not a perfectionist by any means, and so I don't want you or myself to get bogged down and thinking, well, I need to do it just like this person. So whatever works for you, do what works for you, okay? And don't be afraid to try out different techniques. This is why I like to watch other YouTubers that do beadwork and stuff like that, because it's a good way to bounce off ideas off of each other and you know, I've joined a lot of different beading groups because you can learn from other people. So there's no one way of doing things, okay? And I like to just play around, and I come up with some of my own weird techniques sometimes, or I think they're my own, and then I discover someone else is doing it too. So this is what I've been doing recently. There we go. Is I don't do this all the way around. So I start off with, since I already have my needle thread in the back, I first reinforce the back, and then I go to the front and then the center. So I've been doing it opposite the way I initially first started out. And then of course it'll probably change once again down the road, just because I like to try different things. But what I've been doing is, so if you notice right now, my thread is coming out of one of the ones we just recently put out. And what I'll do is I'll go through. You just get a little closer here so I can show you what I'm doing. There we go. So here is, let me just put my needle through here. So here is, can I get my needle through there? Can I see what I'm doing? All right, so my thread is coming out of this bead right here. And then right above it is the one of the tabs that's sticking out. And what I like to do is I don't do this all the way around. I just go through like maybe 3 or 4 of them, just kind of around the whole thing. So I just usually I start off with like 1, okay, kind of do that, and then I just go through the 15 O's, whoops, like this, through majority of the reinforcement, the 15 O's. And then I'll just pick like random ones where from the last row that I just put on and the 11-0 Delica where they're sticking out. So I'll do a few more, and then I'm like, oh, okay. And I'll do that little bit, and it just kind of settles down a little bit there and holds things in place. There we go. And I've been leaving my thread on until I'm done with all my reinforcement, because then I know where I began and ended. And I kind of use the beginning of so like my thread is coming out here. Whoops, let me go here. There. So my thread on the other side is coming out here. I'll kind of use that as a gauge of where I began and ended. You know. There we go. So like right now, I'm coming out here. I got one that I just put on for that last row, and then a Delica that's sticking out. I'll just go through and then go back through that 15-0. Tug a little bit. Oops. And I'll do the same thing for the front, and then I'll show you what I'll do for the center. Okay, so go ahead and go all around. And again, I only do like 3 or 4 of those. And then the rest of them, I just kind of go like this. So meet me back here. And after you've done the front as well. So do the same on the back and same on the front. And then meet me back here when we're ready to go ahead and finish off the tail. And reinforce the center here, okay? So meet me back here after you do the front and the back. Sorry, I'm repeating myself. I know, I'm silly. All right, and so what I'm about to do is I went all the way around the back before I moved to the front and put my needle on. I'm just going to show you how I'm going to do this and I'm not going to burn off the thread or cut it off until I am completely done reinforcing everything, okay? So let me move in a little closer. Can we do that? There we go. So I am coming out of one of the last rows we put on. I'm going through one of the tabs. And I'm just, whoops, that's about to be wrong, and I'm about to screw things up. There we go. There we go. So I'm going to go through one of the tabs. So I'm coming out, and going through one of the tabs. The thread will sink in. And then I'm just going to go through the tab a couple of times through the center. So this is how I'm going to reinforce the center. I'm just going to show you that now. I might as well. So pretend I already did the front. So when I do the center, I'm taking the sections where there's two, and I'm doing kind of like a circle. And then I'm going to go through the very center spine once. Go up to the second part, and what this does is when you create that little circle around the two that are together, it pulls them together so they're like almost like one bead, and it just holds them tight because you got the front and the back pulling on them. So you just do that. Whoops, let me go. I got out a screenshot, so I'm just going to do a couple of more. So I go through the center. One, the very center one, it's all by itself. Oh, and then I go through the two, and I'm like, oh, you guys are cute. I'm gonna pull you together. Okay, I promise. I've only been drinking coffee, but we've been stuck in the house with this COVID-19, and I'm just getting a little wacky. And there we go. At least I have my coffee. I got my coffee. There we go. Ta-da! So I just do that all the way around until I've gone around all the way once. Okay, so go ahead and reinforce the front like we did the back if you haven't done so, and then if you've done that, go ahead and reinforce the center. Meet me back here, and once you've reinforced everything, so the back, the front, and the center, go ahead, cut off or burn off your tail, and if you have enough thread, meet me back here and we'll do the stitch in the ditch. If you don't have enough thread, go ahead and add a little bit, and we'll go ahead and do the stitch in the ditch. And I would probably, if you need to add, do an arm's length. And if you have enough in the front, this is why we did a wingspan, which you most likely will, we can go ahead and get started. Whoops. Why can't I find myself? There we go. We'll go ahead and get started on the stitch in the ditch. So do all your reinforcements. Meet me back here. All right, now that we finish our bezeling and our reinforcement of our bezel of our Rivoli, we are ready to go ahead and do our stitch in the ditch. Now, oftentimes when people are doing their stitch in the ditch, a lot of times they're going to be working on the very, very center of that spine. But we are going to do something different here. We are actually, and there is reason to this, there's logic behind this madness, I swear to goodness. We are going to be using the very top row. And it actually ends up working out in our advantage. And the reason why that is it kind of creates kind of like effect on the bezel, is that it's almost like a blossom. It gives it more of a blossom kind of feel to it. But also in this particular case, because we do have an odd number for our around the center, is that everything's we started off with 30. So if we divide that into 2, it ends up being 15. So when you go around and you count everything, so when you count the very center, or if you count the sections that are 2 by 2 by 2, you'll notice that you have 15 of the very, very center, and then you have 15 of the 2 by 2. So that means when we are attaching our bracelet and so forth, or when we're attaching, let's say, our ring, we are going to do things a little different. We're not going to be on the center for both sides, and we're not going to be on the bottom for both sides. So we have to kind of give that illusion like we are. So having it sit up just a little higher, you don't really notice that when we do that for our projects. For example, I'm just going to pull over the bracelet here, and again, we'll be using this particular bezel with the stitch in this stitch and the embellishment around for a couple different projects. I think we have it for the bracelet, we have it for the earrings, we have it for the pendant, we actually have it in the ring as well. So like for example, here we go. Yeah, so we actually have it for several different projects that we are working on over here. So yeah, and it comes out really nice. It really does. For all the colors and so forth that we're doing it on. And so when you do this, so that's the reason why we're going to the top, but it also gives it that a more of effect. I think if we did on the center, it felt a little bit more like a star, or it would have felt more like the sun. But because it's on the very top, it gives this kind of illusion of more of like a blossom opening up. Okay, enough of my little talk there. Let's get down to business. All right, so we are coming, so what you want to do is you want to be, when you look at the center, you see the sections that are 2 by 2, you want to be coming out of one of those at the very top of the peyote. So, and that's the 11 Delica. So you want to come out of one of the 11 Delicas that are sitting side by side. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to pick up one 11 Delica. And by the way, we are done with the 15-0s, so go ahead and put those away. And we aren't going to need them for the rest of the project, so you don't have to worry about that. So now we are going to take our 11-0 Delica, go through the same Delica we are currently coming out of. There we go. There we go. So we are coming out of that Delica, and now we got stitching it in the ditch. And what we're going to do is we're just going to reinforce that from the get-go. So we go through that spot a second time, reinforce it. Then what you're going to do is you're just going to weave your way down to the next section where there's 2 and come up from the top of that 11 Delica. So right now we're over here. I'm going to go through the very center to weave my way over. I just find that you have more room through the Delica, so it ends up being a lot easier. You could technically weave your way through the 15-0, but you just get more room this way. And then I move my way to the 11 Delica that I want to be at. And again, that's the very next 11 Delicas that's sitting side by side, okay? I'm going to pick up 11 Delica, go through that same 11 Delica that I'm currently coming out of. There we go. Just like that. Alright, so now I have 2 stitches and ditches, and I just keep doing the same thing. So I'm just going to weave my way over to the third one, and you should have a total of 15 after you're done. And the reason why that is, we started off with 30 Delicas for our initial round. And just keep in mind, when you start off with 30, when you first start your peyote stitch, is that half of them are going to be for a different row. They just end up fitting that way when you put on your second row. Alright, so meet me back here after you've gone all 15 of them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do our embellishment. And by the way, I'm actually trying to think of I have a few ideas for some designs where it just has the stitch in the ditch without the embellishment, because I think it's pretty darn cool to begin with. So meet me back here, and what we'll do next is we'll do our embellishment for all the way around, okay? All right, looking forward to that, you guys. All right, so we are getting ready to do our embezzlement around our Rivoli. And before we do that, let's talk about that, because it's kind of a unique thing. So depending on what project you are working on, if you're working on the bracelet and the pendant, this will be a little different for you than if you're working on, let's say, the ring. And the earring. So things will have a different impact on how you do things. So if you are working on the earring, one thing to keep in mind is that when you look at this, you'll see that it goes 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And the reason why that is if you look in between, you got 15 stitches in the ditch, and then you also have 15 spaces in between. And so you can't divide that evenly. You have to be creative on how you divide that. And what I ended up doing is I ended up dividing in groups of 3. With that in mind, these 2mm, and these are Chinese Crystal Rondelles, they were just slightly too big to put all the way around. So I had to be a little creative with that. So what I do is that on some of the spaces, instead of putting a crystal, I put a 11-0 Delica. And then there's plenty of room to go ahead and put the 2mm crystals in the remaining spaces. So I divided into groups of 3. And so each group has 5 spaces. 3 of those spaces are going to be the crystals, and 2 of those spaces are going to be the 11-0 Delicas. So that's how and why you have, 3 groups of 2 and 3 1 single around the Rivoli. So 2, 2, 2, single, single, single. So it kind of works into a triangle, kind of like a star-like pattern. So when we do this, make sure you're coming out of the stitch in the ditch. So let's get a little closer so you can see. There you go. As you can see, I'm coming out of this, make sure I stay in camera frame. I'm coming out of this stitch in the ditch. So what I've done is I've separated my crystals into groups of 3, and I have 3 of those. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my first crystal. And by the way, you can use 2mm fire polish, and you can also use 2mm bicones. So I'm going to go ahead, go through, I'm coming out of one stitch in the ditch, I'm going to go through the next. So I'm going right through there. Just going to slide that in, make sure the crystal lies in there correctly. I'm going to pick up 11-0 Delica, go through the next stitch in the ditch. Alright, turn, and then I'm going to pick up the 2mm crystal. Then I'm going to pick up a 11-0 Delica. Whoops. Sorry about that. I dropped my Delica. Let's do that again. I get so nervous doing this on camera or having anyone watch me. Alright, so we did that, and then now we're going to do the last 2mm crystal for this group. So this is group 1. And keep in mind we have 3 groups. Alright. Now we'll start the next group, and because this the group always starts off with a crystal. We'll have two crystals next to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up a crystal from the second group. There we go. I'm going to pick up a 11-0 Delica. There we go. I'll pick up a 2mm crystal. So this is the second crystal in the second group. Make sure that sits in properly. There we go. Now I'm going to pick up a 11-0 Delica. So, and then we're going to go ahead and pick up the last 2mm crystal for the second group. So all we're doing is we're just going all the way around and stitching through, adding a bead in between each space of each stitch in the ditch and going through the stitch in the ditch. That's all we're doing. And we're about to put on our last group. And we're going to start and end with a crystal. So we'll have two crystals over here and two crystals over there. Alright, so let's go ahead and do this together. So the beginning of the third group, I'm picking up a crystal. Making sure that lays correctly. There we go. Now I'll go ahead and pick up a 11-0 Delica. Make sure that lays correctly. And I accidentally went through this bead, so I'm just going to slide on out. There we go. Now I'm ready for my crystal again. Go through this stitch in the ditch. Make sure everything lies correctly. Then I'm going to go ahead and pick up a 11-0 Delica. Go through this stitch in a ditch. Then I have one space left, and that will be my final crystal. And then I'll just go through a couple of beads at a time, because I'm going to go all the way around and just reinforce everything, and then I'll put in a couple of half knots. Now you have a total of 9 crystals, so just count the number of crystals as you go along, and that way you'll know that you've completed one full round. And put in a couple of half knots. I would say 2 to 3, and then go ahead. Alright, now that we've finished our embellishment on our 12mm Rivoli, we can go ahead and what we're going to do is we are going to be adding, let me go a little closer here. Move this over so everyone can see. There we go. We are going to be adding our ear wire. So what you want to do is take in consideration where you're placing that first ear wire on the first one, and you want to do it on the second one the same. Now for me, and you can play around where you like it the best. I ended up deciding for this particular case, and I may do something different next time, is to go right above one of the single crystals. And so what I did is, when you are in the back, let me just get a little closer. I looked for a crystal, a single crystal. So you see how we have on the very back here, we have the little notch where the single 11-0 Delica is, and then you got the 2. Well, I looked for where we had that right here in front or behind the crystal, a single crystal, and that's where I decided to put my ear wire. So when I do it on this one, I need to do the same thing. So I have my thread, and I'm already in position. So my thread is coming out of this 11/0 Delica. I'm going to go through my ear wire and then go through this 11/0 Delica, move over, turn around, and go through back and forth over and over again. So let's go ahead and put on our ear wire, string it on. So I'm just putting my thread through the first hole, and just remember there's that little bit of a gap here. It's an open, and so when you do put your thread through here, make sure it's sitting in the groove in between. So now I'm just gonna go through the second hole of the ear wire. Just kind of tug that along. You don't have to have everything tight just yet. Okay, now I'm gonna just go through. I'm gonna go through, so I'm skipping the center one, and I'm just gonna go through, and this should allow the ear wire to sit fairly nice. The width is pretty good on this, so that will sit right there. And again, I want to make sure my thread is in the groove of that ear wire. Okay, now that I'm there, I'm just going to weave in and out to get back there. So I'm just going to go up, and things might be a little tight, so just, you know, take your time. I'm just moving a few things out of my way. And you want to go through, I would say 2 or 3 times would be good. If you can do more, that's great. You might not be able to just because it's probably getting tight at this point, but if you can, great. I would say 2 or 3 times. Earrings aren't heavy, so I wouldn't worry too much about it, but I would definitely reinforce. And all I'm doing is weaving back so I can get back to where I was. There we go. Yeah, it's starting to get pretty tight there for me. I don't know if I'll be able to do 3 times. There we go. And now I'm just going to go through again. And I'm just going to do the same thing on this side. We just back up just a little bit. It's a little easier to see me. There we go. And holding things in place helps too. There we go. So I do that. And then I'm just going to see if I can get through, but I'm not going to worry about it. So now you're just going to go ahead, if you're able to go through a 3rd time, go ahead and do so. And then what you're going to want to do is go through here, interweave a few times. If you can move up to here, you can do a couple of half knots. And then meet me back here and we'll put on our ear wire, okay? Alright, so this is the easiest part. So open up your ear wire. It's just like opening up a jump ring. And then when you slide it on, you want to have your piece facing out. So you're going to put it on your ear like this. So you're just going to slide it on. And this one has a ball and a spring, so I'm just going to slide it on this way. Oops. Of course, now that I'm on camera, I am all thumbs. There we go. Let me just open that up just a little bit more. And what I like to do is before I close this, just make sure I have it on correctly. There we go. And then you just close it just like a jump ring. And I'm all thumbs just because I'm doing everything on camera. So you're just gonna let it keep the shape that it is, and you're just gonna wiggle it back and forth. There we go. And then you have your lovely earring. Alright, so thank you for watching my video. I do have a favor to ask, is that when you get done with your projects, please post a picture to comments for me to see. I would love to see your guys' beautiful creations. And if you have any comments, please leave them. I will read them. And take care. Have a wonderful day. And I hope you are appreciating the Isabella series. Take care, everyone.